I'll be in the back if you need me.
Sounds good.
We're ready to go.
Good luck, guys.
Wait a few more minutes. 10 minutes? 2 till? That's
The salsa presentation was phenomenal.
excellent.
Yeah.
How you guys doing? I think we're pretty much at full capacity, so I think we'll get started. Just out of curiosity, before we get started, can I get a show of hands of people that are designers, strictly designers? So we're heavily outnumbered. Are there any hybrids in the room? Good, good. Today's talk, what we will do, Grant and I actually, just before we start, to give you a quick introduction. My name is Dario Tadic. I am in charge of everything aesthetic, including user experience at the web development group right across the river in Old Town Alexandria. This is my partner, professional partner.
My name's Grant Skalak. I'm a developer at Web Development Group in Old Town. So I do a lot of the front-end development for our Drupal sites and some of the site building stuff as well. And work really closely with Dario on a lot of projects. So.
I mean, today's talk is going to be not very technical, so you will not see much code on these slides. We will focus mainly on, it's going to be a four-pronged approach. It's going to be partially design, partially Drupal, partially about a project that we just launched called Guitargate, which we will introduce you guys to, and partially about our relationship, essentially, not necessarily Grant and I, but our teams. So we have a very strong user experience / interactive team, and we have a very strong development team. And it's about the dynamic that we have going on. Welcome, everybody.
You need a bigger room.
We're going to start tripping on people. But part of this presentation, what makes it a little bit unique is that the environment that we work in, it's a very small, we're a small agency, full service interactive agency with a small dynamic team that gives us a lot of flexibility. After completing this project, which is Guitargate, we'll get into, we learned a lot of lessons, and we thought it would be nice to share those with you. We did some things that are completely out of the ordinary. We broke from the norm when it comes to design process or the creative process, and we broke those rules, and we came up with some pretty cool ways to do things. Some of them you've heard about, others may be new to you, so I hope you get to learn a little bit. The project is called Guitargate. We can show you what it is, but essentially it is a website that teaches people how to use guitar, teaches guitar lessons. More than that, though, it opens up to a whole new community of guitar lesson students. So it's a site that, that users can interact completely. So to give you a quick glimpse of the site that we just launched, essentially it is the community. It is supposed to be in Drupal. And 1 second, I don't see the... And on top of that, it is fully responsive. So there are some challenges that came with this site, but to give you a brief overview, it really focuses and it provides a lot of lessons to the user in a streamlined way. So essentially you have all these lessons that the user has to go through. There are videos that are provided by the client. By doing that, there's a lesson plan that the student is supposed to go through. There's going to be some videos along with jam tracks that the students can participate in. Some fret diagrams, which didn't mean much to us, but for the guitar community, it's a big deal. And
Yes, it is.
In order to progress to the next level, the user is required to upload a video of them participating in that lesson. So basically, you have to show your skills, you upload your video, and you move on to the next lesson. Other users within this community have the ability to rate your video, which moves it up in the hierarchy, and comment on it. On the bottom of this interface, we have the student videos along with a discussion. So there's a lot of interaction going on, which poses a whole new challenge for us. So part of the details, basically the target audience for this project were basically middle school to high school age students from various backgrounds. So we wanted to make it a little bit playful, not quite as minimalistic, so give a little bit of oomph to it. So it's tailored to a broad audience.
So since we're at CapitalCamp, I'm going to go over some of the reasons why we chose Drupal and some of the benefits of using Drupal for this project. Yeah, sure. So one of the things that was important for us is, since it's a payment system, having user roles with really refined permissions. Because basically when someone signs up, you know, they either get upgraded or downgraded based on whether they pay, or if their credit card expires, they might get downgraded to a different role where they can't access certain content. Recurly is basically a recurring payment system that we use. During the discovery phase, we looked at a lot of different options for payment systems, and we decided on Recurly just because it has a great interface, which I have some screenshots of later. But you know, they specialize in doing recurring payments, and they're really good at it. So it makes it so much easier for the client to actually manage all this stuff. A good number of the files are being served via Amazon as well. So Amazon S3 with CloudFront. And then also the contributed modules Flag and Heartbeat. So Flag is, you know, has become one of my favorite modules because it's really flexible with what you can do with it, and we utilize it a lot on Guitargate. And Heartbeat as well, just for getting user updates, so building the community of Guitargate.
The big thing for us was to introduce the development team to the project as soon as possible. So basically one thing that we wanted to do from the get-go was incorporate the developers right from the design kickoff, to get them introduced to the project and to get their expertise in every single part of this, the project. The big difference was that we started out creating a prototype, a fully functional prototype, before we actually started doing any of the branding, any of the designs, anything else. So Grant started right from the get-go creating an entire environment where we wanted to see how this thing is going to function. So before we actually started doing wireframes or any of the UX work, Grant had a very good idea of what the limitations were going to be and how that's going to function. One big thing when it comes to the user experience, I know a lot of people, when they create some of these prototypes, the goal is to create a prototype and then test it out and then disregard it and start from scratch when you are creating the actual site. The big difference for us that we actually built off of that prototype. So we use it as the backbone for the design as well. So once we actually, the first time I looked at it, I was terrified because the aesthetics were all over the place. But Grant was able to lock down the interaction and the flow rather well before we actually started fleshing the thing out. The way that we have a tendency to do it at Web Development Group, for us, user experience is not one person locking themselves up, coming up with the idea, and then presenting it to the client. It's a group effort at the same time. So the whole thing is testing. The problem with that is budgets as well. So ideally, you would have some user testing. You would get some people, the client possibly taking a look at it, seeing how it will feel, how it will work. What we would do internally is go into a war room, sketch it all out, come up with all possible outcomes to the best of our abilities, because we cannot predict everything. So we really tried to nail that from the get-go.
Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about, again, some of the modules that we use and the ways that we use them. So Heartbeat, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with it, but basically it's a way to receive user updates from the site. So our client, Michael, who's actually in the audience, he wanted a way for users to, you know, if they see a video that they like, they can follow that user and get updates from when they post content, etc. So Heartbeat is kind of like Twitter, but not really. But using flag, you can flag users so that you are following them, and then with views, pass an argument saying only receive updates from people that you have flagged or followed. So in a way, we are able to accomplish a following type aspect where you receive user updates. Also, an important thing that we try to keep in mind with this project is utilizing contrib modules and how those affected design. So, working with Heartbeat module and showing Dario what it looks like and how it functions and how that influenced his design, so that he wasn't designing something that was really crazy and had to be super customizable, and made my life a living hell. So just some examples of where they're being used. This is one of the comps for the user page. So up at the top, like right here, you see the user progress bar. And basically what that shows you is what lessons you've completed. So a way that we use flag is basically whenever you post a video, it bookmarks that page, or sorry, that lesson through a node reference, and it says, okay, well, they've completed that lesson. And then through views, you're just basically changing classes so that you can see where you're at. And then once they reach the last lesson, there's another flag that says this is the last lesson. If it's been completed, upgrade them from beginner to intermediate, etc. So that's there's tons of ways that you can actually use this module, and it's pretty simple and easy to use. And here's the what's happening section as well. So basically, it's very basic. It's not like Twitter where you have custom messages or anything like that. But basically, when anybody either adds a piece of content, comments on something, or changes their profile, then you receive an update. So and then dev started. And you user flow.
Mm-hmm. So basically, what we did was development was very much in full effect before we even started doing the aesthetics. By the time we were going back to the client and we created some of these typical style tiles, Grant was pretty much creating the entire interface and putting it all together. So what we did was we created a few different options for the client to choose from aesthetically. Very simple style tiles where we had some options when it comes to typography, button styles, colors, and so on and so forth, including text styles, which led further into the actual wireframes that were created and being fleshed out into design. So one big thing that we did when we created the wireframe, so unlike something that where it's arbitrary and just randomly placed, what we did was we created the wireframes to the actual grid. So when we delivered the wireframes to the development team, they were able to get started right off the bat. So any changes that were made beyond that point were very easy for them to do, and nothing drastic would change after that. So while the development was going on, we were doing the design as well. Here's an example of the wireframe on the left and the actual fleshed out design on the right. Some iterations that happened originally when we were talking to the client, the requirements were essentially we needed the lesson plan, we needed the video, we needed the jam tracks and the fret diagrams, and the ability to upload the video. The challenge is really how does that work on mobile? How are we going to integrate this into a page that is actually going to be visible for the user at first glance? And that was a trade-off as well. In an ideal world, we would have the fret diagrams above, so visible while you're reading the text, but that had to move down because we had to have at least 5 visible at the same time. So some of those restrictions we were able to implement in the dev phase very easily, since Grant was already working on them. While everything was being developed, we were fleshing out the designs, which were approved by the client, including the functionality below, which is basically commenting on videos as well as the discussion. So basically, the user has the ability to discuss or add any comments to that particular lesson, and to reply to any of the questions that the previous user has posted. If some questions become important, the client is able to elevate that question to a frequently asked question, which creates this right column where we can highlight some of those questions.
So I'll just touch on one of the reasons that I really like the way that we did this, where I could start development in the wireframe process, is a lot of times I think the development team, depending on where you work, gets the short end of the stick sometimes, where going back and forth with a client between the design phase can take a really long time. So if I can get started while they're still going back and forth, And then the designs are, if you look at the wireframe, it's very similar to the layout between what's fleshed out. So if I can get a head start, then it makes my life so much easier.
That doesn't mean there aren't any challenges or curveballs.
Yeah.
So what we did was, when we were designing, originally we had the comments that appeared below that particular video in a light box. So you're able to see the comments below the video, as well as the user's other videos that are posted. But once it hit the development phase, we realized that was not really possible to put that on one screen. So that's where Grant went to town, and the result is on the right.
Yeah, so if any of you guys have worked with light boxes before, they're cool, but they can also be a pain in the ass to work with. Just because sometimes you look at a design and it looks great, when it's a full PSD or a JPEG or whatever you're looking at, and it looks great on a big screen, but once you actually put it on a computer screen, it looks way different. You have to fit all of this stuff inside of a light box. So actually, one of our other developers was looking at the site, and he just came up with a simple comment where he's like, hey, why don't you just do it like Instagram does their comments, which is photos on the left, comments on the right. And that's how we arrived at this design right here, where the light box is a fixed position on the page and doesn't move, so that the user is not moving inside of another window. So I'll talk a little bit more about some of the modules that we used. Recurly was awesome for monthly subscriptions, and it's really easy because basically all they do is they give you a form that you embed on your page, and through Recurly it sends push notifications. So basically a user signs up, sends a push notification to Recurly, it verifies their credit card, sends a notification back, and then Drupal just upgrades the role of the user so that they now have access to the site. We drew from as many contributed modules as possible. Obviously, we had quite a few, not a few, but 2 bigger custom modules, one for Recurly and actually handling the upgrade and downgrade of user roles, and then another one just for form processing and some of the other features on the site. So this is just, I wanted to show off Recurly, the inside. So one of the reasons that we fell in love with it was the user interface. It just makes it really easy to manage subscriptions, etc. Right here is just a look at all of your users, so you can sort by who hasn't paid, etc. What roles they are. You can see when they signed up, what plan they're at. So Guitargate has 2 plans, which is membership and yearly. So you can basically sort through all that stuff. This is another graph that just shows you the people who sign up by plan. So I think this is monthly, and then this is yearly. And then one thing that Recurly does that's really cool is dunning management, which is basically whenever someone doesn't pay, how to handle that. So what it'll do is, it'll send a notification the first time, and it gives them 7 days of a grace period before they actually downgrade the account. It's one thing that we didn't want to have to custom develop, and it was just a feature that came out of the box in Recurly, so it really made our lives pretty easy. So I'm going to talk a little bit more now about how you can use your team, specifically your development team. I'm not sure if you guys work in shops that are just Drupal specific. I know at Web Development Group we have a couple different mediums or CMSs that we work with, and one of the things that I find a lot is when I ask somebody to do something, the first thing they'll ask is that Drupal? And I'll say yes, and they say no, I can't do it. It's like, well, the thing is, yeah, you're not building the whole site. It's just finding little pieces that can make your life easier, that you can find certain people that are really good at certain things to do. So, for example, we have a really good JavaScript developer. We're using JPlayer here, and it's a custom solution. If you look on the JPlayer website, the design is actually based on one of the examples that they have, but it still had to be developed. And it's one of the things that he was able to knock out within a day, and then just give me the code that I could plug into Drupal. Yeah, so that basically just covers what I talked about. And he also built out the walkthrough script. So when you click on the demo page, it'll just walk you through the different elements on the page. So it's something that you don't have to be a Drupal expert at. you can work with your team and divvy up tasks based on who's good at what and finding the best way to allocate your resources. So,
essentially, the whole point of this presentation is to utilize the entire team and the skills that they have in particular, but that is development, and to work together with the design as well. So whether it is, if you have information architects on the team, to not to shy away to include the developers right from the get-go and to get the conversation started, because developers, along with the designers, when they work together, can come up with the best solutions. So you prevent one of those scenarios where at the end you're like, I wish somebody would have asked me about this because I'm developing that to create a better solution. So include, in smaller teams, try to get everybody in the conversation as soon as possible.
Yeah, I will say, it does, the model that we use for this project obviously doesn't work on every project. Luckily with our client, it was one guy who made all the decisions. But if it was, some of the larger organizations where you have, a board or 5 people who actually has input on the decisions, it takes a lot longer to get things done. So it did make this process a lot easier.
We can see the actual, again, the interface for the key interface for Guitargate, where we have the lesson, as well as the video, the jam tracks, the fret diagrams, the ability to upload the video, as well as the discussion, which is not populated at this time.
Yeah, it just launched on Wednesday or Thursday, I can't remember which one, but so we're still waiting for content to populate the site, but that is coming. So I know that was relatively quick. Does anybody have any questions?
How did you make sure it's going to work out with real guitar players and students and guitar teachers and so forth?
Well, good question. I actually play guitar myself, so I think that's one of the things that we try to take into consideration. We also did a lot of research in the beginning. There's quite a few sites out there that do online guitar learning experiences, but it seemed like a lot of them didn't follow a model where it's based into 4 levels, and it walks you through the process from the very beginning of, I think the first lesson on Guitargate is learning how to tune your guitar. A lot of them just jump in and they throw videos at you, like how to shred or how to do this. So this is more of a formalized process of walking through, the day you actually unpack your guitar, how to set it up, get it tuned, and then working your way up the ladder.
And are you getting the students to interact with each other, maybe critiquing videos and discussing as a community?
Yeah, so one of the features is they can rate videos. They also have the ability to comment as well, and they can reply to comments, etc. And then if it's somebody that they like and they like what they're doing, they can follow them. We also added a feature as well called Showcase, and so a lot of the videos on here, the student submitted videos are going to be related to a lesson, but we also wanted a section where they kind of had the ability to show off and do whatever they wanted to. So there's a whole other section where they can just post videos of them playing whatever they want. Okay.
So are you having them add metadata to the videos when they add it?
Oh, so it's added through YouTube.
Through YouTube,
yeah, so
okay.
through YouTube, and then they just post a YouTube URL, and then it just embeds the video on the page. Yeah.
So I saw you guys are using a combination of high-res comps as well as style tiles, and there's, as everyone knows, there's a huge controversy in the industry over where when to use one, when to use the other. There's some people who say Photoshop is a lie, don't go with Photoshop. The others who are saying, well, how do we communicate style tiles up the chain? We need to get sign off and whatnot. So so you were using both in tandem. At what point did the high-res comps end and the style tiles begin? And if you could talk a little bit about that.
The process? Sure. First I have to say that the process depends on a case-by-case basis. The big thing about Guitargate is that we had absolutely no branding. We had no direction to go into, so we didn't have an idea of which way to go with. The only thing we knew was the target audience, which was a young group. One thing that I wanted to do from the get-go was not to commit to branding. I didn't want the branding to define the user experience, so we left that kind of towards the end before we actually started visual design. So when it comes to style tiles, we got the information architecture finished first, so we did the wireframes. In this case, the wireframes were in Photoshop, which we generally don't do that, but this was a special case. Like I said, we had the grid going on. We knew exactly how to lay this thing out for Grant to get started in development. So he was well on his way while we were cranking on the wireframes. So what we do is generally get just the wireframes, no aesthetics going on, get approval from the client that this layout will work well for them. Once we get the thumbs up on that, as well as how that works responsively, then we move into the high-res comps. So as soon as we get the green light to go, we start creating the comps. We start with the home page first to get that nailed down, and then we start to flesh out the other pages. But considering the fact that we have a lot of these wireframes already established and created, the actual creation of the high-res comps or the fleshed out comps is fairly easy. One thing I always stress is efficiency. So we don't spend too much time on these high-resolution comps. So as Michael knows, we will show the client. He saw the home page and one interior, basically the lesson page. From that lesson page, we're able to apply those styles to a lot of different pages. The importance of that is having developers that are design savvy and having that eye for design. So there's a lot of stuff that I can hand off to him, and he knows how to apply that. To keep the ball rolling as well, not everything will be defined. Stuff will come back to me, of course. If we have a new template, we have no idea how to style this, and we tackle that. The big thing is also, we try not to commit too much in the beginning because there's no way for us to anticipate everything, the curveballs that are going to come. So we take it in small chunks, communicate with the client very frequently, get approval on the small things, low fidelity first, and then we start fleshing it out more and more. As soon as that happens, we move into development.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, what you guys do in terms of requirements? Like, how do you know, hey, when it, user interaction, like,
so, yeah, anytime, with any new project for us, there's a discovery phase. A lot of times, I think we like to separate it out from, and come up with an MVP, so minimum viable product. What do you need? What are the nice to haves? In the beginning, I think the following aspect of it was a nice to have, but I came to Dart and I was like, well, if you design it based around the heartbeat module, then we can plug that in relatively easily. But if you do something crazy, then that's just going to have to be pushed off to a different phase. So, talking with the client, understanding what they need to get this up and running, and the vision of their product. I don't know if you have.
The initial conversation with the client at the kickoff is us listening exactly what they're trying to accomplish. One thing that I will always ask, in an ideal world, let's say there's no budget for this, what are you trying to accomplish? And sometimes the client will say something, well, I would love for my users to be able to follow other users. Something along the lines of Twitter and being able to send messages. So as I sit there and nod, well, maybe we won't be able to send messages necessarily this way. They will be able to interact via the videos and through those comments. But what if we give you the opportunity to follow other users within this heartbeat module? So we're solving that little issue. Your original question was, how do we know to create this interaction? A lot of that was a requirement. Basically, the client came to us and said, hey, I want this to be an online community, not just a guitar lesson site. So that really pushed us and drove us to look for those solutions, as many of them as we can out of the box, and basically within a reasonable budget to create something that is impressive.
Yeah.
You mentioned some of the contributed modules that you used. I was wondering if you also used a contributed theme as a base.
We did use Omega, and then just built a child theme off of that.
Did you face any challenges with that theme?
Light boxes. Those are a pain in the ass on mobile.
Did you use Omega 3 or?
Omega 3. I wasn't really comfortable using 4 yet because it didn't seem like, I'm using it on another project now, but keep in mind that we started the development of this 3.5, 4 months ago, so we wanted something that was ready for a production environment, so that's why we decided to go with 3. But I feel like every project has its different use cases and the problems that you run into when scaling down to a mobile device. So there's a lot of different cases where I just had to turn off functionality. So for example, on the demo page, having that walkthrough is just impossible because you have two things showing up next to each other. So they still get to see the demo, but they might not get the experience that they're going to see when using it on a bigger screen. Yeah.
Did anybody ever have second thoughts about making it mobile, because most people playing guitar are not mobile?
Yeah, but I guess this is more of a question for the client, but I'll try to answer for him. You know, a lot of kids these days seem like they have devices like mobile phone, iPads, etc. So we wanted it to look good on every screen size. So you might not get the full experience on a mobile device, but all the content is there. Of course, I think it's the most usable if you use it on a desktop or an iPad or something with a larger screen. But we tried to just account for everything so that if people want to look at the site on their mobile phone, they can.
The only thing I wanted to add, a big contributing factor is that community aspect of things. So taking the actual lesson is one side of it. Someone may want to see the jam tracks or the freestyle sessions that someone might be just uploading and just commenting on those. So that functionality on the mobile phone was important, and the fact that we were able to accomplish even the lesson plan on mobile was a big success for us. So there's one aspect that may not be as important on mobile, but the social aspect was kind of important to include.
Yeah.
You said you use your prototype as something to build off of. What did you use to develop the prototype?
Drupal. I mean, like I had my I had it set up so that it was I basically built out Heartbeat before we even put it in the design because it was a fairly easy process. As soon as I got the initial piece of it up and running, adding in like the flagging stuff, all that came later. I knew that was possible using views, but getting that up and running was nice for me because that piece of the project was 50% complete, and I could hand it off to Dario. I'm just like, design this, make it look similar to this layout, and we're good to go. Yeah.
During the design phase, did you guys stick really closely to the out-of-the-box Omega grid, or did you find yourself having to customize it or use like a different framework?
Customizing it, especially with like different regions. A lot of times you'll have content that's on the page. So if you look at the bottom section, you have comments and then also views that show up, it's like 3 different views. So it's user videos, but they're sorted highest rated, most recent, and then just showcase videos. So you basically have to find a way to tie in views with comments, and creating custom regions, etc. Was a way that we worked around that. Yeah.
So you said you did wireframes to grid.
Yes.
So were your wireframes like actual Drupal pages, or are they just like PDF? Or?
Well, it would be a Photoshop file. So the wireframes were designed in Photoshop to a grid, so that I know, okay, I need these fields, and the left content on this section is going to be this width, etc.
So were your wireframes just kind of like a minimalistic version, like they weren't fully fleshed out?
Pretty much. Exactly. Yeah, I just needed to see where content went, and basically the layout of what the page was going to look like and the specs. And then I just plugged in all the details later, the colors, aesthetics, and so forth.
For responsive design, did Omega take care of everything, or you guys have to go and do additional customization for?
Yeah, pretty much.
Omega too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, there's a couple use cases where we had to do something custom, but for the most part, it served pretty well, so that we didn't really have to have too many workarounds for it.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
For most projects, you guys do the process, do you build it yourself now, or we just from the beginning of the project just provide this stuff?
It is the way I treat the question was regarding style tiles, whether that's something that we use all the time. I personally rarely use them. Like I mentioned earlier, they really come into play if it's a startup and there's literally nothing to go off of. So, and we have a template that we can modify rather quickly. So it is something that we spend very little time on, just to get a feel for from the client. And generally, I show 3, and I tell the client right off the bat that this is not the exact look and feel, but I would just kind of like to get a feel for it. Once I get a feel for it, then we start the actual design and to flesh it out a little bit more. But that was just that initial step.
But the style
guide?
Yeah, style guide you provide that to the developer when the developer decides.
I see what you're saying. It goes both ways. We have.
What's the question again?
Sorry, whether or not there's a style guide to provide to the developer. We handle it in several ways. It can be either if I'm providing a Photoshop file with the actual aesthetics, we can include that in there with the specifications of everything else. We do have a tendency, if we do style tiles, as mentioned before, at the end of the project, what we sometimes do is take the one that was closest to what the client chose, edit it so it actually matches to what the actual design ended up being, and give that as a style guide to the client then. So it goes both ways and the developer. So we try to maximize the use of that as much as possible. Yeah.
I work with Omega 3 on enough projects, and I know one of the criticisms of it, besides flexibility, is that it can be quite code heavy, especially with unnecessary divs that some developers would
Yes.
think.
Yeah.
Do you have any performance challenges once you launched the site that you had to mitigate for this?
You know, it actually, like I said, it launched on like Thursday, so it's hard to tell right now. But I mean, I'm sure there's going to be, and I know what you mean. You know, when I show other developers in our agency, you know, what Omega looks like, or I ask them to do something like, why the hell is this wrapped in 4 div tags? Well, yeah, that's just, you know, the theme piece of it. But you know, I have messed around with other themes like Mothership. I really like, because you can kind of pick and choose. Well, you can have nothing, but then you can also have a lot. So I do think that it does it provides a good framework, but at the same time there's a lot of clunk to it and stuff that you might not need. But then at the same time, you are really happy when it does provide those 2 things that you do need, and you don't have to do something completely custom.
True.
Yeah.
Collaboration.
Collaboration tools? As in like Basecamp, or we usually use Basecamp, you know, for pretty much the whole project, where you know, we'll share documents, show the client, or sorry, share with the client the files, the design files, etc., and then he can provide feedback on, you know, stuff that he's having issues with. And then we also have a design QA as well. So you know, once we're getting close to the end of development, we have a design QA where Dario or another designer will walk through the site and identify problems where things look out of place. So we use basically a to-do list to track all that stuff, and then the same with a code QA.
To elaborate on that question regarding sharing information, when it comes to specifically design or wireframes, one thing I always stress to death is setting expectations with the clients right off the bat to what they're about to receive. If I'm about to hand them off style tiles and it's 3 style tiles and they're expecting the home page, it can turn out to be disastrous. Same thing goes for wireframes. So I never provide anything to the client until it's been talked, until we talk it over either on the phone, share it on the screen, and then we send them the source file so they know exactly what they're getting. Yeah.
So when you're designing a responsive site, when you present and it comes to the client, do you present in 3 different screens or just 1?
It depends.
What was the question?
When we show designs to the client, when we design, do we show basically do we show desktop, mobile, or if it's responsive, what do we show? Again, I try to be as efficient as possible. I know that the approach is mobile first. We want to make sure to keep that in mind. When I do present, I think it's during the actual design presentation, I like to show desktop, with them having a good idea from the wireframes of what mobile will look like. So I will talk it out, show wireframes for mobile, and then look at the designs for desktop and explain how things will collapse, just because of the timing issue and resources. So in an ideal world, we would do all of that. We do a whole UX process, but ain't nobody got time for that.
Any other questions? Yes.
Did you have to go to the content strategy for this specific project?
Not really, because Michael had all of the lessons written out. So he knew exactly what he wanted, what the videos were going to be. We just needed to basically provide a place for him to put all that stuff in and make sure
content is user-generated content, right?
No, so the lessons are actually generated by Michael, who runs Guitargate. So he has videos, a lesson plan, and then also jam tracks. So if you watch a video on how to improvise, for example, he'll provide jam tracks for something in that key where you can play over top of. And then he also provides the fret diagrams. So the user-generated content is just specifically them either completing the lesson or just showing off their skills on one of the other pages.
So just very straightforward, like
yes.
Content design process.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. Rubik, yeah. I mean, I feel like they do a pretty good job. So, you know, in the end, Guitargate, there's a lot going on, but when you break it down, there's really only 4 content types. So there's the lesson, there's basic page, then there's the lesson submission, which is them completing the lesson, and then there's a user showcase video. So there's really not a whole lot of you know, stuff going on in terms of like content to manage. It's really just him being able to upload lessons in a good way. So we wanted to make that as easy as possible. So I mean, I could show somebody later what the backend looks like, but it's pretty easy where he just specifies the level, what lesson number it is, and then just, you know, it should be as simple as filling out a form.
How about the user that's doing the lesson so that you keep them in that theme?
Yeah, so anytime they post a video, yeah, that's just Ajax, so it's a Ajax form, so they submit the video, fires a trigger that just updates the view underneath so that they never have to actually go in on the back end.
But they are signing.
Yeah, they are signing in. Yeah.
So let's say the site goes live and the client comes back, they have like thought about something more they want to modify. So do you guys going to provide the option in the design com, or are you just go ahead and edit it without?
It depends. Usually if it's something small, but what we do for most of our clients is we have certain phases. So it starts with information architecture. They have to sign off on that before we.
Well, they change their mind.
Well, they sign. I mean, I mean, we always have room for flexibility, adding new things, but you know, we've gotten it down to a process where we try to get clients to sign off on certain phases of the project, so that we know we both have agreed upon this, and you get a certain number of design revisions as well. I don't know.
We do have, I mean, when it comes to design specifically, as I mentioned earlier, we try to nail down as much of the content as possible so there's no content changes. If it's slight aesthetic changes, they can be done on the fly. It can be done in development. If it really needs to go into design, we can handle that. But we do try to get approval on all those things along the way. If something comes after launch and it's something simple that could be an added bonus, we'd be happy to keep the client happy and create some of those extra assets. So that's not necessarily an issue.
Yeah, it's more of a case-by-case basis. I think, you know, if it's something small, then I think we're happy to do it to help them out if it's going to make the site that much better. But, you know, in the end, we have to stay on budget. Otherwise, we could get to lose money. So that's one of the challenges.
How long does it take you to do the site from design to launch?
I think this one, I think we started talking with the client in February. So that's just the initial, you know, business meetings of what they want, getting a contract in place. I think the actual development of it took 3.5 to 4 months.
Everything total, because we set a lot of wheels in motion from the get-go. And keep in mind, we did branding, we did everything. It was about 5 months. So it was a very rapid process for a site with some decent complexity. So we try to, and again, that was the reason to get a lot of these things in motion from the get-go.
Yeah.
How are you prepared to handle extremely high volume should that ever take place?
We're hoping that Pantheon takes care of some of that. So the site is hosted on Pantheon, and we're hoping that right now it's on the business plan. So if that, I think it's one of the more basic plans that you start off with, and we're hoping that we can scale easily using Pantheon. Other than that, that might not be the best question for me, because we had multiple developers work on the site. So if you have anything in specific, you have to ask them about it. Anyone else?
Is there a budget challenge to have that many people in one room, or to involve everyone from the beginning?
It really is. It is a challenge. The one thing that we find is that it is easier to get everyone involved at the beginning. If that few initial meetings, and then the development team has a very good idea what to expect and provide those solutions, than having that back and forth later on. So it is a step that we are more than willing to take, and that risk that we're willing to take, and I think it pays off towards the end. The other thing that I noticed also is when we do involve the developers from the get-go, it doesn't turn into, oh, it's a design, it's my baby, and I give it to them to implement. but they take ownership of this as well. So it really becomes a joint effort, which is a huge deal, and it really helps set on the whole atmosphere.
Yeah, speaking from a development perspective, I think it helps being in on the beginning because you know what to expect. Like once the project is handed off to you, it's not like Dario just handed me the designs like, here, build this. So I know I can already start doing research about the stuff I can use, etc. So I think in the end it makes my life easier. Yeah.
So when you were talking about how you did the heartbeat, you kind of built it out a little bit and then gave it to the designer and said,
right,
kind of make it look like this. What if that doesn't? I mean, what if they say no? Like, I don't like it like that.
Who, the designer?
Yeah.
Well, I think he understands. Yeah.
Well, to clarify, it wasn't like here it is. This is what it needs to look like. But here's the functionality. Make it look like you want it to look. So essentially, make it work within the restrictions. So
yeah.
It was not necessarily.
It wasn't necessarily I would say the look. It was more of it gives you these fields, and this is what you have to work with. So you can have a user picture, their update, and then links to their name, and maybe a time ago. But other than that, there's not much flexibility with it.
So I noticed like when you have the wireframes up there right next to the comp, they're really close. Do you guys ever like deviate layout wise from the wireframes, or do you try to stick pretty close to it?
Absolutely, we deviate all the time. Is that a bad thing? The thing is, we try to keep the wireframing process extremely quick and rapid. So we're focusing on content and hierarchy. That said, we're not trying to. This was a fairly simple. I mean, when you look at the home page, we knew what we wanted to have there, and we had an idea, and that was put in the wireframe, and that translated to the design. When it comes to other sites, the actual wireframe rarely resembles the design, but the content does. And that's why we really place a lot of emphasis, and I don't think these wireframes show it, but we have a wireframe and we have a notes section right on there. And we talk about exactly what the functionality for each piece is. So when I hand off files, if it's a Photoshop file and it has a home page and 2 templates of interior templates and a set of wireframes to the developer, he's able to see the styles, what needs to be applied, and know exactly what the functionality is for the rest of the site. So we try to tackle like the interaction first, and then move on. And you have to tell the client as well. What you're looking at is a very rough outline of what the content of the site's going to be when they're looking at wireframes. You have to set those expectations, otherwise it's and when they get the actual design, that it can vary.
What are the content types for the site?
Content types?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's 4 basic content types. So lesson, which is where he posts all the lesson content. A lesson submitted video. So whenever a user submits a video that relates to a lesson, and then also a user showcase video. So that's just them showing off their skills, which is basically very similar to the lesson submission content type, but with a few extra fields. And then just a basic page, so like the terms of use, contact, etc. So in the end, it's pretty simple in terms of the content types. Yeah, and then some of the other like payment stuff and user roles and rules and stuff that's going on in the background. So, does anyone else have any questions? All right. Well, thanks for coming.
Thank you guys.
If you have any questions, we'll be at our booth.
All right, nice work, guys.